It's Wednesday and we're back with another podcast episode. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, follow, and comment. I hope you like this week's episode, especially if you're an eldest child in the family or an eldest daughter. I think you'll relate. Hello, it's me, Julie Kim. Welcome to Bothered, my little podcast about being bothered. Every week I share short stories.
Living like this, I might lose it.
They're mostly real situations that have happened to me. You wouldn't believe some of them, or maybe you would. Maybe you can relate.
Living like this, I might lose it.
Are you the eldest child in your family, or the eldest daughter, or more specifically, the eldest daughter of an immigrant family? If you are one of those things, or especially if you are all of these things, maybe this week's podcast will relate to you. I posted a couple of clips this week about being an eldest daughter. They are super short, but I am really surprised at how much they have taken off, particularly on Instagram and YouTube.
Why am I so weird? I'm an eldest daughter. Any eldest daughters? You know? Those are aggressive woos from strong women who had no childhoods, everybody. You want something done, you get an eldest daughter because she has been an adult since she was a child. When you're an eldest daughter, especially of an immigrant family, you turn 5 and your parents are like, you're a man now.
They were very popular clips with a lot of people relating about what it's like to be an eldest child or an eldest daughter. There were people who gave examples like, oh, I was a parent to my sibling since I was 5 years old. Another person used the term parentified child, which is like just perfect. And that's basically a child who has to take on responsibilities or attributes of parents from an early age, like a lot of us have, like I have, translating language or culture and having to be the go-between, having to take care of, say, your siblings, or even having heightened expectations beyond what would be reasonable for a small child. There's a lot more to that, and I'll get into that more in future episodes. And those are just the things that happen in childhood. As an adult, I think a lot of us still carry forward some of those attributes. Somebody in the comments said that in her 40s, she's still giving advice to her brothers or the one to organize all the events and things like that. Anyways, this story relates to my position as an eldest daughter. And I think that gender has a lot to do with it. So a little bit of context and just a tiny bit. So I lived above the convenience store that my parents had with 2 younger siblings. And then when the youngest was born, a boy, my mom brought her parents over from South Korea to live with us. There were at that point 7 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I got the sofa bed to sleep on for about 7 years. So, it was a very crowded environment. I'm not even going to say that it was all bad or even horrible, but it was a crowded environment. And I had sensed from an early age that there was a little bit more value placed on being male than female. It was evident in a few things. The fact that the male child was the only one to get a middle name and a Korean name. The female children got neither. And also my grandmother in particular and my mother seemed to really dote on and be openly affectionate towards the male child when they were not to either female children. In the case of my grandmother, I thought it was that the male child was also the youngest child and the one that she got to know from a very small age, who was smaller and of course sweeter to her and more receptive. Here's the story, okay? So we lived on top of a convenience store. We drank and ate a lot of processed foods and junk foods. I mean, that's like basically the pantry that we had downstairs. I actually had to have my front teeth at the top surgically removed before the age of 3 because all of the teeth in my front at the top were rotten because I drank so much sugar. And my parents like to say, oh, you were so bad, you would just drink the sugar. And now that I'm an adult, I think back and I think, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? You fed it to me. You know what I mean? It's not like I could have pried it out of your hands. They were like, but you kept running away. And yes, My parents had legs, everybody. In case you were thinking maybe they didn't have legs, then you would like empathize with my parents. No, they fucking had legs, okay? So I was a 3-year-old running out of the store with a can of Canada Dry ginger ale, who is not sponsoring this podcast. I would run away with a can of full sugar soda, and they'd just be like, oh, she's gone again. Like, what the fuck? So anyways, I had no front teeth, which led to a lot of problems later on, because it was like many years until my front top teeth grew in again. And in the meantime, I was learning words, and I was saying them improperly. So I had this like major lisp. I am going on a tangent, but this is actually an interesting thing I do want to share with you. I had a major lisp for a long time. I didn't know what to call it, which is fine, because I couldn't even pronounce it. And how ironically cruel is it that the word lisp has an S in it? Anyways, I had a lisp, and I remember it was something like grade 2 or something. There was like a special helper that would take me some afternoons to do like exercises on our own. And I swear to God, I thought that I was gifted. I thought that this person, I think her name was Susan, again, very cruel. There was like 2 S's in Susan. I thought she was taking me away to do extra exercises because I was gifted. But no, many years later, I learned that she was indeed a speech language pathologist and was teaching me how to talk without my front teeth that I didn't have because I was fed too much sugar. Anyways, we started to drink a different kind of sugary drink, which we thought was a healthy version. At some point, Tropicana orange juice came into our lives, full pulp only. I love to chew my orange juice. Anyways, I went into the kitchen. At this point, there are 7 of us living there. I went into the kitchen one morning to get myself a glass of orange juice. I poured the glass of orange juice out, and there wasn't a lot left, so I poured the rest of the carton. And as I held the empty carton in the air, my grandmother came up to me with this very urgent vibe, and she said, "Oh no, what is your brother going to drink?" And at that second, everything clicked. I knew 1,000% that I was not the favorite. I knew so clearly that it was less important that I drank this orange juice than my younger brother. When I recount this story, I tell people that, oh, I think I pounded it back. And I looked into her eyes and I slammed the glass on the table and I walked away, because in my head, it's not even like I've constructed a lie. In my head, maybe that's like the fantasy truth. But I will tell you quite frankly that I don't quite remember what I did, but I know with certainty that I did not leave the orange juice there. I fucking drank that orange juice. And let me remind you again, we lived on top of a fucking convenience store. There was no shortage of orange juice. There was no wonder where the next carton was going to come from or when. Anybody could have just gone downstairs to get another carton of orange juice. But this old woman thought that it was imperative that I leave some for her favorite little boy. And it was at that moment that I think I just dissociated from this woman who I already had resentments about. And like, I can pretend and say, oh, it's just an immigrant's family struggling and it's okay. Everybody has it hard. Yeah, people have it hard. But that was the moment where like it was fucking over between this old lady and I. I remember just being mean. I mean, part of it is that I was older and I wanted some fucking space, and and I found her presence like really overbearing. I was not that nice to her probably until she died. I didn't kill her, but she died many years later, and I went to her funeral. I did fly there, and I went there, and I can't say that I shed a tear. I did think a lot about this orange juice moment because I was so curious to know what exactly it was that made me not favored or not the favorite. Was it really gender? Was it that I wasn't a youngest child? Was it a combination of both? I actually think it was a combination of both, but I know for certain that gender played a part in it. I remember when I first got my employment after university, I went to visit my grandmother in a home, and she reached out her hand and she said in Korean, she said, "Omma tonjo." She said, "Give money to your mom." It's like the first thing that she fucking said when I got a job and started making money was to like give money to my mother. And I don't even fucking know why. My mom had money. It was, I think, just this fucking idea in these cultures that like when you start to have anything that you're supposed to give it back to people. And there is this, and I know that that could have happened if I was a male, but this idea of this like payback, whether there is diaspora or not, like whether you're in North America or back in Korea, the idea that you give back to past generations is a thing. And it sounds like a beautiful thing, but it also sounds like a punitive, contractual kind of thing that people put on particularly girls and women and eldest children. I know so many eldest daughters who were mistreated in childhood and still in adulthood by their parents and by their siblings. And then they're still the ones expected to do so much and take on a lot of responsibility. And I know a lot of friends, I actually have a lot of friends who are eldest daughters, and I think it's because we have the same vibe. Like, you know, we certainly know how to get shit done. And I think another thing in common that we have is that a lot of us have like this fucking rage and this maybe grief for a childhood. And I don't mean to make it sound like everything was shitty. Everything was not shitty. There were a lot of really nice things, but there's a very particular experience of being an eldest daughter, and in cultures where there is so much misogyny that you end up, you know, losing a lot of your childhood and being gaslit in a lot of ways when you try to do things that are against, you know, the greater good of the family or whatnot. I know a lot of eldest daughters who have very fractured relationships with their younger brothers who have been so coddled and entitled all of their childhoods that they grow up to be men who have no idea what it was like to be their oldest daughter. And they just compound the fractured relationship by gaslighting their experience and all of that. And of course, I'm talking about other people. Is that about, maybe we can take that part out. That seems very specific, and I didn't even mean to make that specific. You know, one thing I really enjoy is hearing stories about families who put all of their resources and love into their little boys who grew up. And I've seen it happen in Asian cultures, but also from friends of Indian cultures and also Italian cultures, where they put so much love and coddling into the younger boy who grows up to have such a sense of self-esteem and entitlement, but cannot back it up with like actual skills, or don't understand that the rest of the world doesn't think they're special. And then they go into the world and they're just okay, and they don't get rewarded for nothing like they did when they were growing up, and they're met with a very harsh reality. I kind of like that. I kind of enjoy that. And I really, really reject this idea that the eldest daughter is the one that should be taking on all of the responsibility. Of course, I reject that wholly. And it doesn't even make sense, like, to be the eldest kid and like pay for everything. Like, after I graduated, I started like paying for all of the family dinners. I don't even think anybody asked me to. I just felt this need to prove myself to my own family and to, like, I don't know, contribute to the narrative that like I was supposed to take care of shit and to people. And I think I very specifically burned out when it came to that fucking role. Like, how long are you supposed to do that shit for? I mean, you go out with your, you know, sister when you're like 80 and 85 and you're like, no, like, I'll get it. And it's like, no, Gertrude, like, I have money now. I'm fucking 80 years old. It just occurred to me that maybe this is why I have an only child. I have one child, one daughter. I think if I had a boy, then I would have had two children, because I would have tried for a girl. And then I don't know what would have happened if that second child was a boy. Then I'd have many children. I'd be very unhappy. I'll say quite honestly. I think the one child thing is fine because we have a girl, and then I can give her proper attention. And she gets all the juice, actually. Not too much juice, actually. We don't like to lean into the sugar, but one child. Maybe it's because of that, or also because life is fucking expensive. I do have a joke where I say we have our own one-child policy, and we made it a group decision with our child. We're like, you want a sibling or you want to eat organic? Anyways, how how do I wrap up this episode? Look, this has been a story brought to you without full context. Of course, I understand and appreciate the cultural and historical factors that have contributed to what is quite objectively sexism and misogyny in the culture. Whatever the reason, whatever the justification, I am not fucking having it. So when I look back at those stories, I don't actually have a lot of regret to how I acted as a child, but I do think it's fucking bullshit. And I do think there's still this kind of bias in cultures like the one I was raised in that are fucking garbage, and I hope they go away. So yes, I guess in my family, I am not the favorite, but you know what? I am my own favorite. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Bothered. Tune in next Wednesday for our next episode. Next week, I'll be in New York at West Nyack Levity Live on June 19th. And then June 21st, I'll be right in New York at the West Side Comedy Club. I've got a bunch of dates coming up in the fall. Please stay tuned, juliekimcomedy.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I do write from scratch. That's not some chat GPT shit, okay? I don't have an assistant doing it. It's like little letters to you, and I try not to waste your time. I make them kind of short and snippy. And anyways, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And you're welcome to share your feedback and your stories with me at bothered@juliekimcomedy.com. We are also soon going to have a few guests on the podcast, and I will share details soon.
Living like this, I might lose it. Living like this, I might lose it.